Hello everyone, sorry we are late tonight because we have this projector and usually we don't, so we were kind of messy. Tonight the title is The Philosophical Aspects of Chinese Painting, the Taoist influence of landscape Chinese painting from Tang to Song Dynasty. Landscape painting is a very important part of Chinese art, and if you compare Chinese and Western landscape painting, you see a apparent difference. And this difference is not without a reason. The reasons for the shape of the Chinese landscape painting will be explained by tonight's speaker, Sonia Timorska. So, because we are already running out of time, I will ask Sonia to begin her speech.
Okay, so you know the title, you know the subtitle. The topic is in particular Chinese landscape painting, and the reason is because landscape painting is probably the only style of Chinese painting that is so deeply grounded in Chinese philosophy. In this speech, I'm just going to talk about the Taoist influence on landscape painting. Even though Buddhist and Confucianist influence shouldn't be neglected. Regarding landscape painting, actually Confucianism doesn't have that much of an influence, but Buddhism does. But anyway, we have to focus on one to keep things simple. The period is chosen for a reason, and I'll explain later. Just one thing, please keep in mind while you're listening the speech, while you're looking at the paintings, try to avoid building cross-references with Western landscape painting or any kind of painting, because it's very important when you analyze, when you try to understand Chinese painting, to be understood from its own cultural environment. So I'll just go briefly through this. The historical setting is very important. Namely, the landscape painting appeared for the first time as an independent style of painting during Tang Dynasty, which was known as a golden age of Chinese civilization. The emperors of this time was very, let's say, were very good towards art. Actually, the very famous emperor Ming Huang was an artist himself, so he dedicated loads to painting. And at this stage, so landscape painting appears, and by the end of Tang Dynasty, it's already developed, and it's regarded as a superior form of painting. Okay, I guess you were expecting a painting, so here it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next, between Tang and Song Dynasty, there is a so-called period of 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, but I'm not going into any details. Song Dynasty is also very important because most of the landscape painting we have preserved today are actually from Song Dynasty. Most of it made in Tang Dynasty, during Tang Dynasty, was destroyed, or in Song Dynasty there were still copies made of the old Tang paintings. So this was the era where China kind of established as a modern state with huge political and social reforms, and it's the time when the first painting academia was established. There is difference in landscape painting between Tang and Song Dynasty, and I will just briefly say that the way researchers differentiate is that Tang Dynasty is more poetically oriented, whereas the landscape painting in Song Dynasty is more philosophical in its nature, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so let's see first who were the painters in this period. This is very important because the painters who started landscape painting as an individual form of painting were actually not the painters who were painting any other paintings. The ones before, like for example the ones painting religious paintings or portraits, etc., were actually called artisans. They were not regarded as high-class people. They were simply just okay. They were skillful in art, so they could just paint whatever the emperor wanted to be painted. But the painters of landscape painting were actually they were actually they were scholars. They were skilled in philosophy, calligraphy, poetry, and then they became painters. We have to keep in mind that Confucianism and Taoism are not to be regarded as kind of contradictory. The painters were actually Confucian scholars in their training, but they were Taoist in their attitude. They had high status and they didn't work for money. They actually even looked down upon the so-called artisans. They were educated in philosophy but what does it mean? Probably those of you have some idea that Chinese philosophy is actually not separated from life. So if you're a philosopher, you have to serve as an example of what that philosophy is. You cannot just talk about it without actually being involved into it. So they were also to represent people of virtue, and they were spiritually inspired. So a great painter was considered the one who creates in accord with Tao. So this is the main distinction of if we want to draw any parallel with Western painting, because when we analyze these Western paintings, we say, we analyze it in terms of beauty, whereas the first criteria for analyzing Chinese landscape paintings was not beauty, but actually how much it reveals the Taoist thought. And just briefly about the Taoist philosophy. It's a holistic philosophy that actually understands the world as a unity of everything rather than a simple compilation of parts. And very importantly, it's a philosophy of experience. So you don't have philosophy outside of life, as opposed to, let's say, Western philosophy, where the philosopher can be locked in his room and do his research. Whereas Chinese philosophers were philosophers out there in the world. They were acting, they were interacting. The main Tao is actually embracing everything, but not just everything that there is, but everything that can become and everything that is not. And it's revealed with its through its dialectic play of yin and yang, which actually gives the vitality of the world. Okay, here are the main 6 points. Is the clock working? Oh, I'm going too fast. Okay.
Slow down.
More time for discussion. Okay. Okay, Shoshi. Okay. Am I speaking too fast? Or it's okay. Okay.
That's great.
Okay, so these are the 6 points through which we are going to look at the reflection of Taoist philosophy in Chinese landscape painting. First, nature. Lots of people tend to look at Chinese landscape painting as, this is very simple, it's all the same, it's just the mountain and the trees, but the whole point is that the people who were creating it, they were not tend to represent the reality per se. Actually, the landscape painting was actually to represent Tao. And who can represent Tao? Not just anybody, because you have to be in accord with Tao. You have to act through Tao to be able to express Tao. And therefore, nature was actually a very good means to convey this idea of Taoism. Because nature is free and has that particular non-attached existence. It is there with or without us, and it acts spontaneously, which is the main principle of Taoism, acting through non-acting, and it's in constant flux of transformation. Nature also is manifesting the two main principles, the dialectic play of yin and yang, which in paintings can be seen through the motifs, through the composition, brush strokes, etc. There are lots of details about it. Okay, man and nature. Man is inevitable component of most of Chinese landscape paintings. And even though like you're looking at this painting and it seems like yeah, it's all nature, but there are always little man figures you can see. Like there in the bottom, there are either villagers, there are scholars drinking tea, there are Buddhist monks wandering through the landscape. There are two different explanations why the man figures are there. And it's interesting that from Tang to Song Dynasty, the man figures were getting smaller and smaller. So one of the explanations is that just to convey the idea of how insignificantly small man is in relation to nature. Another, more related to philosophy, is the idea that actually man and nature are not separated from one another. Actually, for the Taoists, there is no life outside of nature. So there is no, so the man is just integral part of the whole universal principle. So the ideal, of course, is to live in a harmonized unity within Tao. Okay, depersonalization. This more talks about actually the painters themselves. We know that, okay, it's kind of common saying in Taoism that the man of Tao forgets himself. And I'll just read something from Tao Te Ching that says, which I think points out this very well. All things arise, and he does not turn away from them. He produces them, but does not take possession of them. He acts, but does not rely on his own ability. He accomplishes his task, but does not claim credit for it. It is precisely because he does not claim credit that his accomplishment remains with him. So actually, it's the so-called detachment from the artwork. So if we keep in mind that the painter was supposed to be man of Tao, then the creation is the landscape, the painting actually was sometimes taken as Tao itself. If the painting is good enough, then the painting is Tao. So what's the purpose of the painter? He just conveys the idea, and more in accord with how he acts, even better. And that painting is supposed to serve others. It's not painting that belongs to him. And that can be seen, like there are paintings that do not have a signature of a painter. Another very simple example, sometimes on the scrolls, a painter, a master, would work with his students. So we don't really know who painted that scroll, which we can see that this the personalization was quite strong, and that to be related to the idea, to the understanding of self in Chinese philosophy. Okay, the perspective. This is also in relation to the depersonalization. As you probably noticed, the main focus, actually in landscape painting, there is no focal point. So it's always application of the avial view, which means you can look at it from everywhere. But it's why? Because the painting was not to represent the point of view of the painter. The painting was supposed to represent the nature itself, or Tao, finally. So it's not my point of view, it's anybody's point of view. Also, the Chinese never developed the shadow or geometrical perspective to express depth. you can see it's usually through vivid colors in the front and more diluted colors in the back. Monochromatic style is one more very important feature of Chinese landscape painting. What does it mean? Basically just black ink on white rice paper. So some people even call it achromatic, right? No color. The Chinese preferred black and white over the color because the color was considered as lacking spiritual animation and philosophical depth. And you can see, like we see the world in colors, so it's kind of strange why would they represent the landscape in just with black and white. It's because simply the black and white conveys the outwardliness, the feeling of outwardliness, and it's more intuitive and subtle, and can actually deliver a message which is kind of beyond the world, rather than focusing and concentrating on the picture itself. It's more to inspire thinking. And again, black and white in relation to yin and yang philosophy as two opposites, without which we cannot really have the whole. And finally, non-painting as creating. What does it mean? You can see in loads of Chinese paintings there is vast empty space. And that space, especially because they were not using colors, is just simply not painted. Sometimes it stands to represent the sky or water or clouds. Sometimes it represents nothing. Well, actually, in Taoism, we have existence and non-existence as complementary part of Tao. So, and also, we can kind of relate it also to Buddhist philosophy, where the void, the emptiness, is actually in the ground of all. So, again, form and emptiness are to convey the idea of yin and yang. Actually, the void is a very important concept in Eastern thinking. Just think, if you don't have the emptiness, you can't use the cup. Actually, the emptiness makes the cup. If you don't have emptiness, you can't have a house because you live in the empty space, right? So actually, you can see how important is the emptiness. And another very important, another crucial point is the painting was act of effortlessness. Actually, the painting is to be expressed spontaneously and to know when to stop. Okay, so finally, just few main points. Chinese landscape painting is definitely a very fascinating expression of art because it's very simple, at least in its appearance, not in its philosophical grounding, but it actually can embrace immense breadth. This is what I mentioned before. Aesthetics were primarily established on the moral purpose and secondary on the beauty per se. So actually the painting, and it's kind of depressing really, because that means that these days we can't really comprehend Chinese landscape painting. And it's a remarkable sublimation of art and philosophy, because actually we can, through landscape painting, we can kind of better understand Chinese philosophy, and the philosophy itself, it kind of reveals through this visual means of art. And finally, it's one more wonderful way through which we can try to understand Chinese culture. So, that's it.
Okay, do you have any questions?
I'll start.
As usual.
I think you mentioned the medium was what kind of ink?
Black.
Or just black ink. And I think the second part of the question was, were the paintings mostly commissioned to be put on scrolls, or were they also put on pottery or walls or anything else?
Well, I was particularly, well, landscape paintings were also painted on walls, or even on caves, also like on walls in the palace. But yeah, the ones I was showing were actually are paintings on ink, black ink on rice paper and silk sometimes. And,
Okay. Yeah, I just was wondering because I mean I know there are landscape paintings on pottery, but maybe that was from a later time period.
Could be, and I would assume that was more to do with the kind of like more just like.
It was probably made to
people
be
who were-
sold or something.
Yeah, and people who are more into like into the technique of painting, but not really spiritually. I don't think that bears any like spiritual value. Yeah.
Okay, any other question?
That sounds like you better don't have any further questions.
No?
No, I think we'll have lots of questions.
But you have a comment about the PowerPoint.
No, actually, I'm very impressed by the background. Actually,
Wow. It has to be all for Tao.
I didn't know that you could do that with PowerPoint. Wow. How about that?
Okay, yeah. I have a question. At the end, you said that you said again that the value of the pictures were the paintings were moral, not aesthetic. And then you added that today we cannot apprehend Chinese paintings. So I didn't quite get this part. Why today we cannot comprehend Chinese painting?
Well, because it seems like you have to really be into Chinese philosophy. So maybe you can. No, because it seems like you have to know now why this painting was painted like that to be able to actually appreciate that painting. And so if the painter is a man of Tao, he's a man of high morality. So let's say more spiritually enhanced he is, better the painting is. But how would we know? How can we tell that, right? So you have to be also kind of on that kind of level to be able to really understand, oh yeah, okay, this painting is really, can actually touch Tao more than the other one. I mean, it's difficult to tell. But the point is that we shouldn't just simply look at it in terms of beauty, whatever that is. I mean, that's also...
Is it possible just by sitting and looking at the paintings you could become more in touch with Tao?
I think so. I mean, there is kind of like, well, at least for me, some kind of like magical feeling. I mean, you kind of look at it and then, it's kind of like you could look at the mountain and there are like little paths through the mountain and there are little men going there and then, there is always like some kind of story. There is some spirit of freedom, let's go with.
So in a way, maybe it promotes contemplation.
Yes. That was actually, in a way, that was also the purpose of painting. And they were even identifying if the painting is that successful that you can actually have the same experience looking at the painting rather than really like going into the nature.
Okay, we have a question back there in the room.
How do we know that at that time they didn't find the painting beautiful? Are there any scripts or writings about it?
No.
Maybe they
It's
find it very
not that they were not treated as beautiful or not beautiful, but the main criterion was the correlation with Tao. And secondary is, it's just we cannot simply look at it through the terms of Western aesthetics. That's the main idea.
Okay, Dean?
Yeah. I think that if you, any real, true, great pieces of art, when the artist or even the writer or whatever kind of art they're doing loses themselves completely in the work that they're doing and creates something that's from the heart without thinking and creates a picture, it's a lot different than someone who's commissioned to do a piece and just thinks, I got to get this done, and does it without any heart. or without any kind of being there right in the moment and lost in their work. And I think that it doesn't really have to be, and not to cross-culture, cross-culturally, but I think it doesn't have to be restricted to Chinese art. I think that all true great pieces of art have this quality where people can look at it and say, wow, and get taken away in some kind of spiritual context.
Yeah.
Whereas you can look at a piece that was obviously just someone had to do or paid to do, and it's just very technically good, but no heart is in the picture. Were there any pieces like that in Taoist times where people were just commissioned and they just did art that wasn't very in touch with Tao?
Yes, probably. I mean, we don't really. Well, I didn't come across like, or actually, yeah, they are kind of, because you can always have people who are talented, who can master the brush, right? They don't have to be spiritually inspired, right? But they can paint. So I don't really know how they were like differentiating, but keep in mind that actually most of the painters were actually court painters. They were at the court. They were officials. They were employed at the court. They lived there. Later on, yes, we do have painters who were the so-called expressionists, like kind of like freestyle painters. But originally, the one who were claimed as painters were the court painters. Well, probably there is evidence of others, but these were the main drivers of the style. Probably later on it spread, like.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thanks.